my friends, I'm telling you, I just can't believe the unveiling. I've been looking at all of the biology of the Earth, which is literally biology, and trying to make sense of the things that we see, and most of it I'm pretty much making sense of. The one thing that's always bothered me is how much sand there is. And I said, where did all the sand come from? Now, I do know that sand is on the outside grip skin. There's a lot, it's very quartzy, scratchy, dense fiber, really tough stuff on the soles of your feet and on your tips of your fingers and so forth, your palms of your hand. I thought that was probably a lot of the sand. However, I got this from Greg yesterday, and as I did a video on it showing that it's basically like a dog bone. This thing right here. This is going to blow you out. I got the dog bone again. I got this thing. This is where the sand comes from. It's bones. And I can show it with Nero's bone here, my dog's bone. This is just... I'm telling you, I can't, I don't know what to think anymore. Every day is like a whole new world just opened up for me. So now, this is where the sand came from. You say, I don't see any sand. Well, let me show you where the sand came from. And the reason, a lot of it is, as I was working this thing, it scratched the hell out of my little bench top here. And I could hear it going, and then I really looked at it close in a microscope, and I can see it's literally 100% coated with sand, quartz crystals, which are basically sand. And as it works in with the salty waters and so forth, they keep grinding down to smaller and smaller particles. But some of them were very, very big, and some of them were about this size, and they're all over the Earth, which is the sand. Okay, my friends. I believe this is a bone. I'm basically 100% sure of it. And it's basically the same as this bone right here. Now, there are crystals on this bone, which I'm going to explain to you anatomically. I'm going to show you in the manuals, which are associated to these little fibers. My dog's chewing at this thing. These fibers end up going down to these little tendon balls. And these are the little tendon balls. The fibers are gone off of this. And it's eroded down to where it's going to become sand. And I will show you in the microscope. I have it focused in here on some of this surface which will erode out to become sand. And it is this exact same bone right here. And this is the other bone right next to it. I mean, they're identical. It's just phenomenal. And where do you see this? I have to turn the lights off, and we're going to go up to the microscope. Let me turn the lights off. All right, now, you know what sand looks like. Well, that is basically sand in the rough. All right, now, if that eroded off of this bone, and that is the bone, let me crank up the light a little bit. Now, if that eroded off of there, these would be all little bits of sand. Those are what sand is. And then as it works itself, the red and the black and the gray and the little crystal quartz-looking things all mix together. Now, that's one spot. Now, let me show you another spot where it's got a different texture to it. You see this area here is more red-blooded. It's still got a lot of the red blood attached to it. But this is what is called the periosteum. And this is an investment attached to the bone where all of your flesh attaches. It's incredible. I didn't realize this until I started looking it up just the other day. I mean, I knew it long ago, but you can't remember all this stuff. Let me show you in the manual. Hold on. All right, so I'm saying all of those little crystals are what we're looking at here. And they originally were attached to these type of fibers like this. The whole thing was, some areas they go deeper. That's why these fibers are still here. And there's a little bit of something here that's collagen material, that there was something where it locked on. The same thing with this. It has areas here where things stuck to it. Like right here, you see that? That whole region right there is basically the same as this whole region right here. It's almost identical, literally almost identical. It's just unbelievable. But true, and all of those fibers are what we're going to see in the microscope that would have been attached to these balls. Alright, again, this came from Greg Morrison. I just got it yesterday. When I saw it, I immediately did a video on it. I should have waited, but I was just blown away. This is sand. Now, this is a different thing than this. This came off of this. And I was looking at this and I'm thinking, you know, when I first got it, I started looking at it, and if you can see, I don't know if you can see those little fibers up the top here, hold on. I think you should be able to see them. There's little fibers coming out of there, and I could feel them with my fingers, and I'm thinking, wow, that's crazy. What is this little fiber? And I couldn't wash them off. And here they are, right here, you know, in the microscope. And they are attached to these tendon balls right underneath here. And then I started to keep going deeper, and I realized I could actually see the tendon balls. And those tendon balls are the same thing as on this right here. They are the exact same thing. And wait till I show you in the anatomical. This is freaking right out. All right, this doesn't have any more of the fibers. It just has the balls. All right, this is where I freaked out. These are those tendon balls. Those are the balls. And this is right here. It's a shot right from this area somewhere. These are all the fibers that are coming down to attach to these tendon balls. And they were everywhere. Now, Greg cut this off flat, but you know, he sawed it off, but I could feel the fibers, and this is what freaked me out. So I'm looking right about in this area here, and here it is, and the fibers are sticking up from it. I don't know if you can actually see the fibers anymore. I mean, they're there. They're not going to go anywhere. You can see them, basically. And they're stuck, you know, they're just not going to come off of there. I tried cleaning it off. I thought it was something just stuck on it. No. It's going down to there. Now, in the bone, this is a membrane, all right? This is totally different than a bone. Well, it's not totally different than a bone. It's a membrane, but the bone has a periosteum, which is a little bit different. Membranes do have the fascia and the interstitium and all of these little tendon balls and fibers, yes, but not like the bone. I didn't realize that until just recently. This is a whole new experience to try to understand all of this stuff based on biology and chemistry and geology. It's just, it's overwhelming, but it's really interesting to me. All right, this is just over the top cool. I am looking now at this, which is that bone, and this is the other one that was this block. All right, which is this membrane. Now, what we're going to be seeing is all this stuff eroded away down to these balls here on this bone. Very similar. So all this stuff will be gone from the red this way. We'll be right here in these gritty little balls, and they are tough as can possibly be. So that's what we're going to be looking at right here in the microscope. And that is also these exact same things right here. Now, most people would agree that would be called sandstone. All right, and if you eroded that in some acids or salts or whatever, all of these little spots would come out. Now, let's take a look at them real close. what they do look like really, really close. All right, well, you can see those little quartz crystals? Every one of those was one of these tendon walls. All right, so these bones, as I now know, and I did not before, bones are totally different, excuse me, than your skin type of tendon balls. They invest all your red fleshiness into your, up against your bone. And that's where all this red fleshiness is coming from. Most of it's eroded away in some of this particular bone. Some of it is just completely saturated with blood still. Let me see if I can find one of those spots. All right, this is just too cool. Unbelievable. Now, we need to get this understood so that people can start studying these things. And understand, a lot, just general knowledge, but a lot of this is about our past, too. Which, history, everything's wrong. I mean, literally everything. Now, then again, this one here is this membrane block. All right, and it's right up at the edge of this membrane block where the fuzz sticks up right over the top. I don't know if you can see the fuzz sticking up there, but maybe. It only sticks up into certain spots where he cut it in such a way that it was right, I don't know, somewhere right up about like this, right off to the edge of that and the brown stuff. Because that's, well, you know what? That's exactly what it is now that I'm looking. Because there's areas where he cut it. And when it cut right across that brown stuff. That's this brown stuff right here. All right, and then right off that brown stuff goes into the black stuff right here. You see that? And this is the fibers. You see, I know you can see the fibers now. You have to be able to see them. See them all sticking up there? All of those fibers, each one of them goes to one of these little tendon balls underneath. And that's these little tendon balls. So he cut wherever there's brown here, there's fibers. And that's why I felt it. And I said, boy, this feels funny. It should have been cut just like that, or like this, or like that, or like this. But it was right off the top of the skin. And that's why it has the fuzz sticking out of it. It freaked me right out. I said, whoa. And then as I started digging deeper, it's a membrane. And I can see all of these. That is this block. It's right here. Right up at the top. And again, whoops, you can't see that block. Maybe sure I make sure you understand. I'm not sure where I was, but I'm going to make sure that you do understand. This brown is this skin cut right across here. All right, of this membrane, or this, it's cut right across the membrane. Let's put it that way. Whatever was anchored to this was anchored in these little brown spots. Because when I could feel it, I could feel all kinds of little fibers. And you see those little fibers? You see those little fibers sticking up there? They're all over this thing. And I was wondering, what the heck's going on? And they're sticking up mostly where it's right cut across this brown layer, which right below is where the balls are. So the little fibers end up sticking up, and I could feel them. So anyway, I did this video to show the balls and the fibers. Then the same package from Greg had this, which was the bone. And I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking to myself, boy, this stuff here is really like sandpaper. It's just gritty, and it was scratching all over my bench, and it was making a mess of things. So I really looked at it close, and I believe this is completely saturated with these balls. So I go to the anatomical, and sure enough, correct amundo. All right, this sort of packages it together. Excuse me. This is the bone, completely saturated with these little black balls, which are the anchors of those tiny little fibers that you saw coming out of the top of this membrane. And this is nothing more than a membrane. We can see the fibers. This is a different style, I believe, than the bone. This appears to be skin or something along that line, some type of a membrane of an organ or whatnot. This is a different story. But this picture, or this shot, is from this. This now is in the upper shot here. Hold on, let me turn the lights off so we can see. And all of those little balls that we're going to see here are those little balls up there. Now, they form either like quartzy, which this is. Excuse me, tickling my throat. All right, this is very quartzy, and then you got black, and you got the different colors and so forth. And then there's other areas where they're almost completely red and garnets and things like that. It depends on where the specific gravity is. Means if you ever saw like a beaker and it had different solutions in there, and you saw a layer of this, a layer of that, the red and the green and the blue and so forth, different molecular compounds, different liquids, they'll separate according to specific gravity, how heavy they are. And that's basically what this does, because that laid on its side like this or upside down, however it was. One side is all the red blood is going to run out, and the other side is going to be a different chemistry, because the red is the iron and so forth, and the red blood is very liquidy, and it would flow down, and I've shown that, and I'll show it again in this bone right here. So that's what we're just looking at, and that right there is sand. Now, this accounts for how much sand there is, because every bone is coated with this. And let me show you something. I can show you that this is what the chemistry and the anatomy says. And I never realized it until just recently. Well, actually just until a day or so ago. All right, this is just over the top. There's different types of bones. There's compact bones, there's spongy bones, and then there might be some different other types of bones. I'm not sure. But they do know for a fact that there's like platy ones like that, and the spongy ones that can sort of contort. Now, this is what you want to think about. Listen to this. These are the bones. The surface of the bone is full of protrusions. All right, little bumpy tubers and so forth. Localized reliefs, those are the little bumpy insides. Sharp spines or thin grooves, round foci, which is, little holes and so forth. Elongated canals that often play very important articular roles or enable tendons and ligaments to be inserted on the bone. Everywhere. Where do you see this? At times, the movement of the muscles themselves shaping the bone that they are in contact with creates this roughness. They have to be grabbed in there so your bones so your muscles can actually move around and be pulled on something. Now, each bone. Did I say each bone? I think I did. I said each bone is coated with a fibrous membrane called periosteum. There it is right there. That's the periosteum. It coats and wraps that bone. And guess what? If you could, it shows the periosteum. Well, let me see if I can pull them right in on that. Actually, you don't have to see the ends of the bones, but you can if you'd like. So now, this is like the end of a bone. All right, maybe it's this bone, that type And when they're talking about these little cavities and so forth, that's what they're talking about, these grooves and cavities and holes and some things like that. Of course, this is a mud fossil. It's not bony bone, white bone. It doesn't happen. In a mud fossil, it's just nucleophilic substitution. Whatever was here gets invaded and substituted. Now, in certain conditions, it's just unbelievable what you can end up with, depending upon what the chemistry was, what the pH was, how hot it was, if it was in mud, if it was in this sandy stuff, where it was in its final resting place, how long it was exposed to waters, what was the temperature of the water, what was the pH, how much transition metals were in there, was there any acids and salts. You know, all of that stuff plays a part in what the end result was. Now, however, my current situation is, where did all the sand come from? Right there. Right there. You see this? This is called the, whatever it is, erectothelium or something. This is the periosteum. Now, so there's one side that holds the balls, and the other side is where the fibers come out to meet into the muscle. That's what's going on here. I hope that makes sense to you, because it makes sense to me, and now I fully understand, I believe, where all the sand came from. Because that always bothered me, is so much sand. I know where the mud comes from. The mud is flesh. It's a red, bloody flesh. But where does sand is a different type of particle, much different, and it's so pervasive. And then in certain areas, the sand is like a black sand, and then there's other types of sands in other areas, and that's because there was a different type of creature, and it had different type of chemistry. And their bones were, you know, we know there was all kinds of gigantic creatures, just like it said in the ancient text. So let's just get past that. This is, you know, if you want to go with reality, you got to go with reality. The stuff is here, and the chemistry now, and the anatomy, and everything shows us very, very obvious what was here, and it was all true. You know, I mean, not all true. You see, here's the thing. Nothing is all, and nothing is nothing. There is no nothing, let's put it that way. There's always something in nothing. Maybe you want to put it that way. But what I'm telling you right now is there is something in this something. That, I can tell you, is something for sure. Okay, my friends, that is my contention, that these little balls are from the tendon entasis. This muddy stuff is from the fleshy part that it was invested through, and then the fibers came out. Fibers are gone, balls are left, and there's still some muddy stuff amongst it. And that is nothing more than what we see right there, which was from that block that Greg sent me. Right here, whoops. All right, that's from this membrane. And these are those same balls, and this is cut off here basically. And then these are all the little fibery things. I can see them here. This is the bone, and that's where I was looking right here at the periosteum, which is right there. So that's where all the sand came from. Okay, so that is the surface of the bone. Down below, and I say that is sand, down below I have a little container of sand that we are going to be putting in a microscope when I remove the sand from this bone. Because this is where sand comes from. This solves a mystery that I have been pondering for quite some time. This is just too much. I'm down in the sand. Now, this is all-purpose sand. It comes in bags. You can buy it, throw it on the ground and so forth. Now, make concrete out of it. Here it is right here. That's exactly what we had on that bone. Exactly. However, all of the red stuff is gone. Alright, the red stuff in there is gone. But all of those crystals are the same crystals we were seeing before on that other bone. No difference whatsoever that I can see. Is there any difference you can see? There's some black ones, there's some really good, clear ones, there's some white ones, there's gray, all kinds, same thing, exactly the same. Alright, one more time on the sand, and all that is sand. And what the sand is what's left over from the bone fibers that are sticking down into it. And all the other stuff is washed out of it. They call it washing the sand. And they wash out all the other weak stuff. And they have the really gritty stuff left over, which is from those bones. Alright, so I think we're pretty much done with this bone. Alright, which is all we can really see on this now is what's left over, which would turn into sand when it eroded. We know that it's saturated with blood inside. And I'm like 100% sure it's a bone. And that is the periosteum of the bone. And that right there was something just like my dog's bone. Something was stuck into that right there and locked into this bone so that it could do whatever it had to do. And that's why my dog is chewing at that spot, because that's where all those little fibers are. Now we're going to look at that in a microscope and see if we can figure out anything, because it also has other spots. You see the yellow looking stuff there, which has that little ridge there. Something grabbed a hold of this and was pulling it or so forth. And the same thing here. There's a little different colorization. We'll look at this in a microscope and you'll see this was somewhere where this was invested into the body. Same with this, but it's eroded down to a point where the spots that had stuff glued to them, all that stuff is gone. And it just depends. It depends on the chemistry it's in. It really is as simple as that. All right, so let's do some more digging. Okay, this is a bone, and I believe it's from one of my giants that's in my yard here, probably from the one that was the fingertip. And I measured this out and figured how big the circle would be around. It runs out to be, I think, about 48 inches completely to circle out this bone. Now you say, "Oh, that looks like concrete." Well, let's consider maybe that's possible. Let's take a look at it in the microscope and see. And this is the center core right here, or it's close, it's inside enough where it's starting to get into a different material. As you can see, there's something different about this. You see all of these cavities and holes and so forth? That is exactly what they talk about in the bones. This is what allows all of the circulation of blood and so forth in the bones. And this is the periosteum area below the periosteum. But we should be able to see some signatures of life in here. So we'll take a look at that. I could be wrong, but who knows. We'll look at things like this and so forth. But these were CAT scans primarily of this particular hand here, of the body parts that go along with this hand. And this is the grip skin right here. And I always thought that the grip skin was the source of sand, because it's very gritty. And that's what I always thought, but now it appears that it's the periosteum of the bones, more so than that. I'm sure there's a lot. I know there is a lot of really tough grittiness in that. That's called grip skin, and it's this stuff that's peeling off right here. Now, my other big finger is this one is much bigger. This one here, that whole hand is it's only about, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet wide, something like that. But the other one is much bigger, and I think this is the one here that this bone is from this guy, because this is a pretty good sized bone. And it's not mud like the other one was mud, and this is not mud. This is really hard. Now, this is the fingernail. All right, and the fingernail butted right up to the skin, obviously, just like yours does. And this is so hard that there's no getting blood out of it. So I broke this off to get down inside, and it popped right off. Even still has the fingerprints on there. This is the little pad that goes to your next bone so it doesn't scrub and scratch up. Blood supplies. And that right there is the grip skin, and came off right here. Right there it is. That's, you see the sweat pores? It's just like your fingerprint. The fingerprint ridges are these, and they have sweat pores. You see the little sweat pores? And this, it popped right off just like this, exactly like that, just like you peeled it right off. When I smacked it, it popped right off. I wasn't expecting that, I got to be honest with you. And you can see there's a total different texture on the second side of this. It's like a basement layer, and then it went down just exactly like this. And I went down deep and got blood out of there. I mean, literally almost like raw blood. And I believe, like I said, that fingertip is 3 feet long. And these are the fingerprint ridges, so you can, that's good size. And this bone is a very good size. Now, we're going to look at it in a microscope, and we'll do a little checking with it. We may even do a little catalase test and see if we can get some catalase reaction out of this. All right, but that's the curve of the bone. This is not concrete. You're going to see. And that's how this much distance is just this much curve. So think how huge this bone would be in a circular pattern. I did measure it, and I put a loop of string around it or something, as I recall. I laid it on the floor, and this is big. Good size. And I'm going to show you that it is truly the bone of some giant creature. All right, look over here now. This is Nero's bone. What we're looking at right here, there's that little fluffy spot where it's sticking up all the fibers. I don't know if you can make that out or not, but it's what it is. Now, this is it up in the microscope. You see the fibers? The rest of it is as bald as a cue ball. These fibers, let me see if I can get a better shot of that. It's very hard because they're so white, everything glows. You know what? Let me take this light off it and put this light on it. Sometimes that works better. Sometimes it doesn't. Well, that might be a little better. You can see that's where the fibers are. And that's because something was wanted to lock in there, some muscle tissue. You come over here, there's no fibers in there. It's all ready to go, but they're not there. Here they are. And here's where they hold some kind of muscle assembly to this bone. And it runs down this whole ridge. You see that? And that's why he's chewing at this spot. Because there's still some red blood in there. You can actually see every here and there. You can see a little taste of red blood. See that? All the way down? This is exactly the same thing that's in my belt. And I'll show it again because it's just too cool not to show. You know, if you open your eyes and just look what's around you, it's stunning how many comparisons and how many things just make sense. All right, here's the broken open spot in this bone, this gigantic bone. Now, you can see the difference here between this tissue and this tissue in the bone. This is starting to get into the marrow. The outside was really bone. Now, let me see if I can go deep down in here. All right, now, I'm going to do a catalase test on this. I'm almost sure this will have catalase reaction, but I was on the other thing too that I got from Greg, and it didn't react. Now, this, I'd be way surprised. Anybody want to bet? Anybody got any money to want to bet? And here's why I say that. You see this red? You see that black? Whenever you see that, you've got vein and artery blood running close together. They are sort of working their magic within your bones. Let me see if I can home in a little closer to the black. See the black? That's vein. You see the red? That's artery. This here is a membrane, basically that separates the bony part out here from the marrow part in here. Now, let's get the best we can get a shot of it. I guess that's pretty good. Now, I'm going to do a catalase test. You know, this should really be a good test, because this gigantic bone, you could see there's virtually no question that's a vein, the black blood. And there's the core right there. Now, same thing here, there's virtually no doubt that that is an artery, which is the red blood, and that's the core of that. Now, let's get in between the two of them, because one of them's deep. The red is always deeper than the black, because the red runs out. The black just seals right off. All right, now. All right, so here we got our vein. Here we got our artery. Now, they both should have membranes surrounding them. So we should see a very good reaction. You're probably going to see it everywhere. That's what I would suspect, but I have never tested this. So you will be the first to see. All right, now don't forget, this side out here is basically the shell of the bone. In here is the marrow and all this other, whatever else is going on in here. And I say artery, vein. Now, 2-to-1 odds. Who wants to take it? 2-to-1, I say, this will produce a catalase reaction. Now, we are going to be the first to see this. Whatever happens, happens. Now, I'm going to probably have to take this and move everything so that we can get down here and see it firsthand. But we might be able to see it from way up here. You know what to look for. It's going to be bubbling like crazy, I'm hoping. Again, we're going to have to get down there, but I'm seeing it bubbling up. Let me get right down on top of those little spots. All right, if this bubbles up, it means that there's enzymes in there. All right, get your money out. She's bubbling. Hold on. See it bubbling? It's bubbling everywhere. Your body doesn't like extra oxygen. Extra oxygen causes a lot of issues. Now, see, look at this. Look down inside, if you can see it. Hold on. Down in that hole, I was watching it bubbling, and it stopped bubbling but it's attacking all of the things that are down inside there. These oxygen reactive species. I'm going to put some more on there, and you're going to see it ate up all the oxygens. It did its job, and it did it fast. I think we can get a lot more reaction out of this. Let me try this spot over here. This should be interesting. Should be interesting, my friends. Let's see what happens. See it bubbling up out of there? This at one time was an artery, I'm sure. Arteries purge out because there's no restrictions to them. Look at that. This stuff intrigues me, I'm telling you. And you could buy these little scopes, you know, for like, I think they were $25 or so. You can buy one, I think on Amazon, somebody was telling me. And they plug right into your cell phones even. It's probably even better than the one I have here. Look at that. Now is that? Hold on, I gotta focus in on that. Those aren't bubbles. I don't think. I think that's built right into the glass. Coming out. Those might even be blood cells. I'll bet you those are blood cells. I bet you that's what they are. I'm going to go with blood cells on the center of an artery. Because, again, I tell you 100 times, I tell you, arteries blow out. Well, you see all this? This is all chemistry in here of biological enzymes that are trying to fight the invasion of these reactive oxygen species. And this is this gigantic bone. Alright, I'm pretty sure this is a vein here, the black spot. And it's got the same sort of a reaction going on, the Catalase reaction coming out of it right there. Oh, you can see it pretty obvious here. And there's other spots that's doing the same thing, but where there's really a blood vessel, that's where you're going to see most of the reaction happen, because these enzymes primarily exist in the blood, and they roam the bloodstream looking for these invaders. Basically, that's what it is. You're looking at it right there. Your immune system in action. Check this out. This is the outside fabric, and that's what collagen looks like, and that's the coating of the outside of this bone. You see all these little holes and all the little muddy looking stuff in it? That's literally blood. Alright, and they're all over the place here, they're everywhere. Now, I was watching Myron Cook, he's talking about, he was walking across something like this, big blocks of these. And he was talking about them being footprints. Well, no, they're not footprints. They're bone foramen, they call them, basically, which are little divots and pockets that go down inside the bone, and things attach to them there. Blood runs through them, and nerves and all that stuff. But this fabric is the coating of life. This is the fabric of life. This is collagen and kerogens and keratins. And I'll show you, and I could, you know, it's undeniable. Alright, I showed you the outside of this and all that fibers and all that looking stuff. Now, what else I'm looking at here in the microscope is my cowhide belt. Now, you remember all those fibers and all that brownish looking stuff? There it is right there. This is my belt. No difference whatsoever, virtually the same thing. Now, what is all those little black spots? those are tendon balls, and they run to fibers. And you say, "Ooh, I can't see." Well, yeah, you can see the fibers if you look, and look with a critical eye. You can see them here and there, but can we see them in copious quantities, which they are in copious quantities, as I was gasping about before? Well, let's see if we can do that. Hold on one second. All right, I showed you the outside of this big rock, and it had all of these fiber-looking things on it, basically the same looking thing. Now, what we're looking at right there in the microscope is my belt. This is what the fibers of the belt are like after they're tanned, the tanning. But if we could come back here and look, you see where the belt loop is, right here? Let me come up a little bit. We can see all of those fibers. And every fiber has a ball at the end of it. And there is a bazillion fibers, and there is even more bazillions of balls. You see them all over the place? Well, everyone has its own fiber. So that is what makes the belt so flexible and tough and strong. And this is what I'm finding on these rocks. And these are what's left over after the other stuff erodes away. That ends up being sand. Now, it's in the skin too. But primarily now, I'm thinking it's basically bone-oriented is more. But I'm also thinking the skin has to somehow invest into the flesh, which the flesh has to invest into the bones, and the bones and the tendons. I mean, it's just one gigantic, huge, complex system. Very, very, very sophisticated, unbelievably sophisticated. All right, so here's my belt. Now I'm going to go over to the big stone. And here it is. Hold on, I have to focus in. It's the same stuff. You see it? That's basically the same stuff. Only this is eroded down to where you only have the last little bits and pieces. And the hide is a different texture than the bone of this fiber. The hide has to be extremely stretchy. It's like the lungs. Let me show you on the lung the difference in the fiber. You see how this is nice and tight and fixed? They're just grabbing a hold of that bone. They're not going to let go. These are tiny, tiny little fibers. Now, in your lungs, they have to expand. They're like rubber bags. Let me show you that. All right, this is like a police lineup. Caesar, we're going to inspect you deeply, my friend. The big bone we've looked at. We'll look at it again. This lung we haven't looked at. This lung, maybe we looked at it, maybe we didn't. The belt we did look at. This is the lung. This one here. DNA tested, CAT scanned, no question whatsoever, it's a lung. And this is the fabric. This is basically the same fabric that I showed you here, which we will see is here, which we have seen is in my belt, which is this lung. All of that stuff's the same. Even Caesar has a very, very similar situation, because all collagens appear to have turned into feldspar. And feldspar is aluminum silicates. And there's a process that it happens, and there's electricity involved in this as well. I'm really, really learning everything about it. There's the heat, and there's electricity involved, and this was a global, worldwide flood. Extremely high in silicates, extremely quick event, and this was also written about by Derek Briggs from Yale in a recent paper, not too long ago, that says that all over the earth in a very quick, short amount of time with extreme amounts of silicates in ocean flooding waters, all these soft-bodied creatures were preserved in this one layer, one strata they call it. And like I say, that was by Derek Briggs from Yale. and some other associates. And I presented this to him a couple of years before, well, several years before he published his paper on it. So I would like to be involved in this research, which I am. I'm really leading the research. They don't. He even admitted in a paper. He says, "Well, nobody really understands what's going on here, but this one layer is completely saturated with these perfectly preserved soft-bodied creatures." All right, let's take a look at Caesar. There's Caesar right there. Same stuff. It's collagen. It's the fabric of life. Basically the same thing we saw on this gigantic bone, which I'll go back to that. Here it is right there. Same stuff. It's the same. That's because that's the fabric of life, which is, and that was Caesar, the other one. Now, so Caesar goes to the side. This big lung, or well, not big, but it's the one that I had DNA tested. Here it is, the same stuff, but it's much bigger fabric. And that's why this stuff is real flexible. Your lungs have to do this all day long. The bone is different, totally different. Now, that's this lung. Now, what other lung do we have? Let's look at this. Hold on. Oh, okay. This lung here. Again, CAT scan, DNA tested, certified in every single way possible. And again, flat as a pancake on one side because it was a great flood. This is what really upsets academia. And this is the same thing, flat as a pancake on one side because it was a great flood. And it was a hot water great flood, hot. It boiled all of the outside flesh and turned it into mud. And then the bones turned into sandstone, basically. All the outside of the bones turned into sandstone, which I think I've shown you, or will for sure. And they all have this little tab on it, these lungs. This is the pleura. You see the thickness of that pleura? That's all these balls and straps being able to do this all day long, because it's got to be like a big rubber bag. It's exactly what it is, a big rubber bag. Whoop, 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 whoop. You're dead. If it doesn't go bloop, 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 that's it. Case is closed. So, what did we see? We saw everything the same. Now, let's take one last look at this one here. And look at that one up in the microscope. Hold on. Again, I got to turn the lights off. It's the same stuff. There is no difference. Everything here is the same stuff. You see it? It's all this fabric. All right, that is the collagen and the fabric, and it's called feldspar. They call that feldspar. It's aluminum silicates, and it's fascia. Fascia, for some reason, bonded just like that with the aluminum silicates, and they say that happens. Listen to this. This is crazy, because clay is nothing more than flesh. Red clay is nothing more than flesh that had eroded away and turned into this muddy, bloody stuff. Now, they use that to make pottery. And guess what they use to coat the pottery? Aluminum silicates, which is feldspar. I'm not kidding you. I am not kidding you. They use feldspar to coat clay, which is what we use. This is feldspar coating the clay. Underneath here is the clay. Isn't that something? Everything makes sense when you start looking at it. All right, before I go with this, I just want you to be sure of, you understand about the CAT scans and how mud fossils, in their extreme mud fossil condition, which this is really literally turned to mud. They call it mud stone. And you can barely make anything out in the CAT scan. However, Jesse Garant and Associates, if you need any CAT scans done, those are the people. Absolutely fabulous. They did 7 CAT scans for us. And this is, they do the outside, they do through the whole thing, they do all kinds of stuff. And this is the only way you could see anything on this fingertip. I knew it was a fingertip, but you can only see so much. This one here is, I believe, the vein. and this one here is the artery, and these are the tendons running up, and that's the bone right here, and this is a thumb, and it's from the right hand. Now, the palm I found is a left hand, so this must have come from the other hand in the same hole. I just realized that at first I just wrote it off. Oh yeah, it's the thumb. Well, then I realized, no, it's the wrong thumb. For the hand I have, the left thumb, you know, looking at it this way, the bone should be on this side. It's not. It's on this side. So it's this thumb. See? The bone is over here. And the extra chunk is laying over here. All your other fingers are right in the middle. So this is the thumb from the other hand. I show a left hand. Well, here I show it to you. I show a left hand here. But that was a right thumb. And it came out of the same hole. I have knuckles and I have all kinds of parts from this particular hand. And this one here was small compared to my big one. This was only, I mean, 3 or 4 feet wide, something like that. The other one was, well, just the fingertip itself right here is 3 feet long. And I think I showed you it had the fingerprints. Where is it? Maybe I don't show you. Well, I did have the fingerprints. Hold on a second. Alright, as you can see, there's very little scripting that I do. I just sort of roll with it. I call it a Roger ramble. What are you going to do? I'd spend my whole life scripting things out. So sometimes it doesn't come out in what you'd call a flow. Now, this is, again, Jesse Garant and Associates. Absolutely phenomenal. You would never, ever, ever see that. Never. Nobody in their right mind could possibly see that just by looking at these specimens. But that's where the fingernail was. Alright? Now, this down here is where the tendons locked in. Let me see. Alright, so we saw this piece here where it shows the tendons coming up and the bone sitting off to the side, which means it's the thumb and the wrong thumb. We went through that. Now, here's where you really got to look. Now this, and they go through the whole thing this way so you can see the slicing, but again, very, very hard to see a big change. Now what can we see? Right there, you see that? Remember that bone was offset? That's it right there. That's the bone. Now, if you don't take your time and look, you'd never see that. But I know what to look for, and I could see the depression of the bone. I understood it was a bone. And when you can see, it's just a very subtle difference in the chemistry. Because what you're picking up in these CAT scans is a change, an abrupt transition of chemistry. That's it. Which means that the molecules of the vibration coming back at you will change abruptly, and you'll see a difference in color. That's what a CAT scan is all about. Well, that's what any kind of ultrasound, all that stuff. No. It's bouncing off layers in there, and if it finds a different layer, it bounces off different, and then it picks it up in the intelligence of the machine and says, ooh, that came back at such and such a frequency before it was going at such and such a frequency. That means it's this hard, and it displays a color. All right. Hopefully that made some form of sense. What else? Jesse Garant, absolutely fabulous. This is the tip of the finger. This is where that apical tuft is. And you see this? Look at this. You see that ball right there? I'm not kidding you. Watch this. That's that ball right there. That end right there is this is an apical tuft. Watch. It's phenomenal when you can really understand what you're looking at. That ball right there is this ball right here. And this is the apical tuft. Now this is from another finger that had it completely eroded away, and the apical tuft is disassociated. This finger has everything, just like brand new. Now let me see if I can find an apical tuft. Hold on. All right, see that? That's the apical tuft right there. There it is. It sits right on the tips of all your fingers, and that's where all those little balls come in, and the straps run down as the tendons, which is right here. You see from here, all these little straps run down from that apical tuft. And they run down to the bone ball. I showed all that stuff, and I think I showed you all that stuff, the ones I have here. I get lost in these presentations. Like I say, there is no script. And what else didn't I show you? That's just some more anatomy of the hand. But you see all those little tendon straps? Those go to this balls. And that one sticking at the end, it just blew me away that I could see it so easily, wherever the picture was. But anyway, it's amazing. See, there it is. There's the ball right there. That's that ball. And that's the apical tuft sitting right at the end. Isn't that something? It's truly incredible when you really start to look and think and start to do some deep investigating. It's just phenomenal. And it's time to do this. I mean, I think most kids and everybody, especially kids, would love to do this and be brought up to be knowledgeable and but be respectful. You know, everybody's got to be respectful of each other. That's what we're missing now, is respect for each other. In my opinion, that would go a long way. And I admit I have a hard time sometimes dealing with people, especially ones that are just insulting and want to just engage in some kind of form of, I don't know why they do it. They want to be sort of nasty, and that just happens. And it seems to be a way of life, which leads to, if you go back at them with that same thing, you end up with just a round of arguments and fights. So I sort of distance myself from that now. There was a time that I had a hard time not engaging in that. You get sucked into that pretty easy. But I realized that it's better just to walk away and not deal with it. If somebody wants to work with you, they work with you. If they don't, they don't. It seems pretty simple to me. Alright, this is just amazing. This is from a place called Sand Atlas. Colors in sand. These are all different colors from all different places around the world. Hawaii, Caribbean, Turkey, France, Sri Lanka. From everywhere around the world. And then they go into each one at a time. And as I showed you, this is basically the same thing, only this has green in it. This one has like red in it. This one has black in it. This one's more red. And then they have bigger and smaller chunks. And then there's some that are blue and some, all these different colors, but they're basically the same little tiny tendon balls. Basically exactly what I showed you in mine, only these have different colors in them. You see that color? Hold on. I did some tests with bones and stuff, and this has obviously got some kind of copper in it. That was done with copper. And anyway, and I'll show you the transition metals. But these are the same things I showed you. Exact same things. This is sand. And this is eroded from the bones. It's eroded from the bones. Alright, so you saw all those different colored sand. This is the different transition metals that are in your body with all these different oxidation states that are capable of pinching on. They call them ligands. They flow through your body in the blood. These are tiny, tiny little molecules. But they can pinch with these extra little pluses and minuses, like magnetically attached to something. When they get to where it's supposed to be delivered, the other one will say, I'm more magnetic, I want it. It drops it off. It gives them something else. They go back and drop that off at the, to be cleaned up. This is the transferring of things. They're transition. They transition through your body, doing nucleophilic substitution, bringing things in, taking things away. They're deliverers and trash collectors, and they're colorful, and that's why you see them in the mud fossils. They're all over the mud fossils. Look at this. This is in China somewhere, and this is a tendon mat. Now you see these little ripples. This is tendon, but this could also, I believe, turn into sand. I believe this could erode into quartz type sand and be a different color, all these different colors. Now why I say it's tendon, and the reason you see all these different layerings is because they're different structural bits of membrane-ish stuff. And here's what it looks like when it's alive. Alright, this is Getty Images. Ed Reschetti. And this is what it looks like. But when it gets flooded with transition metals, certain different chemistry here will want to stabilize with certain different transition metals. That's what created all those different gorgeous looking colors, because each one of these different types of fibers has a different chemistry. And this is, I'll take the blue chemistry, I'll take the yellow, I'll take the green, I'll take the red, and then they're all in a line like this. This, you would never see that until they turn into mud fossils, and then you see the detail. That's when you see the details, when they're in mud fossils.